Hey guys, tonight we plunge into the glittering wreckage of royal marriage scandals that didn't just raise eyebrows, they shattered crowns, toppled dynasties, and left the world gasping in a mix of horror and guilty fascination. From bedroom betrayals that sparked wars to forbidden loves that rewrote history, these unions, or their explosive unravelings, reveal the raw humanity behind the thrones, kings and queens as flawed, passionate, and petty as the rest of us, but with armies and tabloids at stake. We're talking affairs that ignited revolutions, divorces that defied gods, and matches so mismatched they make modern reality TV look tame. Before you settle in with your crown of popcorn, hit that like button and subscribe if these royal romps hook you. Drop a comment on your favorite historical scandal or where you're watching from. What time is it there? Now, dim the lights, cue the dramatic harp music, and let's waltz through the scandals that proved even blue blood runs hot and messy. Picture England in the early 16th century, a land of fog-shrouded castles where armored knights clashed in jousts, monastic bells tolled across green fields, and the Catholic Church's grip on the crown was so ironclad that defying the Pope was akin to treason against God and king alike. But at the heart of this realm stood Henry VIII, a monarch who began his reign as a shining exemplar of Renaissance royalty, tall, athletic, intellectually sharp, a composer of music and defender of faith, only to devolve into a corpulent despot, whose court became a theater of terror filled with executions, annulments, and religious schisms that redrew the map of Europe. What ignited this transformation was no grand battle or foreign invasion, but a deeply personal crisis. Henry's obsessive quest for a male heir to secure the Tudor dynasty against the bloody specter of civil war, like the recent Wars of the Roses, a pursuit that led him through 6 tumultuous marriages, 2 beheadings of queens, and a defiant break from the Roman Catholic Church, founding the Church of England in a move that not only shattered ecclesiastical unity but unleashed economic upheavals, sparked international conflicts, and set the stage for centuries of Protestant-Catholic strife, all while exposing the raw vulnerabilities of power when tangled with passion, biology, and politics. These scandals weren't confined to whispered gossip in Whitehall corridors. They exploded onto the world stage, shocking contemporaries from the Vatican to Versailles, as Henry's bedroom dramas drained England's treasury on legal battles and wars, fueled inflation through monastery dissolutions that flooded markets with seized wealth, and ultimately reshaped global alliances, with ironic layers, like a king once hailed as defender of the faith by the Pope becoming the very architect of schism, his supposed divine right clashing with his all-too-human frailties, such as rumored impotence and tyrannical whims that turned love into lethal intrigue. Let's delve into this mayhem, tracing how Anne Boleyn's captivating allure sparked a religious revolution that cost her head, how Catherine Howard's youthful indiscretions met the axe amid whispers of the king's failings, and how each union's unraveling rippled through economies, faiths, and fates, blending historical grit with the poignant twists of a monarch who bent heaven and earth for an heir but found only fleeting triumphs and enduring tragedy. Henry's saga opens on a note of political promise rather than passion, with his 1509 marriage to Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess widowed after a brief union with his older brother Arthur. whose untimely death left her a pawn in dynastic chess. At just 18, Henry inherited this alliance to cement ties with Spain against mutual foe France, and initially it flourished. Catherine, intelligent and devout, complemented the young king's vigor, bearing him a daughter, Mary, in 1516, amid a court alive with tournaments, masques, and intellectual pursuits, where Henry composed tunes like Pastime with Good Company and Jousted with Flair. He even earned the title Defender of the Faith from Pope Leo X in 1521 for his anti-Luther tract, Assertio Septem Sacramentorum, a staunch defense of Catholicism that underscored his piety. But beneath this idol lurked peril. Catherine endured 6 pregnancies, plagued by miscarriages and stillbirths, yielding only Mary as a survivor. And in an age where female succession invited chaos, foreign claimants, or noble rebellions, Henry's anxiety mounted as Catherine approached 40, her fertility fading, prompting him to question the marriage's validity under Leviticus 20:21, which forbade wedding a brother's wife, a scruple that conveniently aligned with his wandering affections and the broader Tudor fear of dynastic extinction, echoing the Wars of the Roses devastation. By the 1520s, this great matter consumed him, not as a quiet dissolution, but a diplomatic storm, with Henry petitioning Pope Clement VII in 1527 for an annulment, expecting papal favor given precedents like those for French kings. Yet the Pope, freshly sacked by Emperor Charles V's troops in the 1527 sack of Rome, and effectively Charles's captive, hesitated. Charles, being Catherine's nephew, fiercely protective of her honor and Spain's English alliance, leading to years of fruitless negotiations spearheaded by Cardinal Wolsey, Henry's chancellor and papal legate, who convened a legatine court in 1529, only for it to stall under Vatican orders to delay, infuriating Henry and dooming Wolsey, who was stripped of power, charged with premunire, undue papal loyalty, and died en route to trial in 1530. His fall marking the rise of reformers like Thomas Cromwell, who whispered of breaking Rome's hold. Entirely into this breach stepped Anne Boleyn, the scandal's incendiary heart, a lady-in-waiting to Catherine, whose French court polish witty, fashionable, with a dark beauty and sharp intellect captivated Henry around 1526. But unlike his prior mistresses, like her sister Mary, Anne refused to be a mere consort, holding out for queenship and leveraging her allure to influence policy. Their surviving love letters, burning with ardor, as Henry professed eternal devotion and promised to make her his only mistress, a vow that fueled his annulment drive and positioned Anne as a catalyst for change. Her Protestant-leaning circle, including Brother George and allies like Cranmer, pushing Henry toward reformist ideas that viewed the Pope as an obstacle rather than infallible. By 1532, Anne was pregnant, prompting a secret wedding in January 1533, followed by Cranmer's appointment as Archbishop and his swift annulment of the Catherine marriage in May, declaring it void ab initio. But this defiance provoked Pope Clement's excommunication of Henry in July, escalating the crisis into full schism with the 1534 Act of Supremacy, proclaiming Henry supreme, head of the Church of England, a move that not only severed ties with Rome, but unleashed the dissolution of the monasteries from 1536 to 1541, where Cromwell's agents seized over 800 religious houses, netting the crown £1.3 million in assets equivalent to billions today through land sales and melted treasures. Funding Henry's lavish court, French wars, and naval expansions like the Mary Rose, though it sparked economic inflation as flooded markets devalued goods and ignited rebellions like the 1536 Pilgrimage of Grace, a northern uprising of 30,000 demanding monastery restoration and Catherine's reinstatement, suppressed brutally at a cost of 200 executions and further treasury drain. Anne's queenship, crowned in June 1533 amid lavish pageants that strained finances, proved bittersweet. Elizabeth's birth in September disappointed hopes for a son, followed by miscarriages in 1534 and 1536, the latter coinciding with Catherine's death and Henry's jousting accident that left him with a festering leg ulcer, chronic pain, and perhaps impotence, exacerbating his paranoia and turning affection to resentment as rumors swirled of Anne's sharp tongue and alleged flirtations. Anne's downfall was swift and savage, engineered in 1536 by Cromwell amid Henry's infatuation with Jane Seymour, with accusations of adultery with 5 men including court musician Mark Smeaton, Henry's friend Henry Norris, and shockingly, her brother George, plus treason and witchcraft, charges historians like Eric Ives deem fabricated to eliminate her without mess, as torture extracted confessions from Smeaton, while others protested innocence, leading to Anne's trial in May, where she defended eloquently but futilely, beheaded on May 19th with a French swordsman, a mercy from Henry. Her final words proclaiming loyalty to the king who had elevated and destroyed her. The irony cuts deep. The woman whose seduction fractured the church met the scaffold, her crimes perhaps masking Henry's failures, as contemporaries whispered of his inability to consummate since the accident, a humiliation that fueled his need for a pliant replacement in Jane, whose brief reign delivered the longed-for son Edward in October 1537, but claimed her life from puerperal fever days later, plunging Henry into genuine grief and a 3-year mourning that saw no new marriage, though politics soon intervened with the 1540 union to Anne of Cleves, arranged by Cromwell for a Protestant alliance with her brother's duchy against Catholic threats from France and Spain. Yet Henry's revulsion at her appearance, dubbing her the Flanders mare after a disastrous first meeting, doomed it the marriage annulled after 6 months on grounds of non-consummation, costing Cromwell his head for treason in promoting the match and exposing England's diplomatic isolation. As the Cleves fiasco wasted funds on betrothal gifts and defenses against anticipated invasions that never came. The scandals peaked with Catherine Howard, Henry's 5th wife, in 1540, a vivacious 17-year-old cousin of Anne Boleyn, whose youth promised heirs but hid a reckless past of premarital affairs with Henry Manox and Francis Dear, whom she appointed to her household only for rumors to surface, compounded by her alleged tryst with courtier Thomas Culpeper, leading to investigations by Cranmer that uncovered damning letters and confessions under torture, resulting in her execution for treason in February 1542, alongside Culpeper and Derham. A tragedy laced with pathos as Catherine practiced laying her head on the block the night before. An irony as Henry's own declining health, obesity, ulcers, possible syphilis sparked whispers of impotence, making his accusations of betrayal ring hollow amid court snickers that he couldn't perform the deeds he condemned. Finally, Catherine Parr, in 1543, a twice-widowed intellectual who survived by nursing Henry's ailments and navigating heresy charges for her Protestant sympathies, outliving him to marry Thomas Seymour and influence the young Elizabeth. Her marriage, a calmer coda to the mayhem, but still shadowed by the king's tyrannical suspicions that nearly sent her to the Tower. The economic repercussions were profound. Each divorce and execution cost fortunes in legal fees, PayPal bribes failed, and court pageants, while the dissolution injected short-term wealth but caused long-term inflation and unrest. With monastery lands sold to nobles, creating a new class of Protestant gentry, but displacing thousands of monks and poor reliant on abbey charity, fueling poverty and vagrancy laws that strained local economies. Wars sparked by the schism-like Henry's 1542 to 1546 conflicts with Scotland and France, costing £2 million, half England's GDP, were funded partly by seized church silver, but left the realm bankrupt, with debased coinage eroding trust and trade. Religiously, Henry's break ignited the English Reformation, paving for Elizabeth's golden age, but sowing seeds of civil war under Charles I. While internationally, it isolated England, forging alliances with Protestant states, but inviting Catholic plots like the Armada. Henry's legacy, a dynasty secured briefly by Edward, who died at 15 in 1553, Mary Bloody Mary's Catholic backlash, and Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen, who never married, ending the Tudors, but at the cost of 72,000 executions in his reign, many tied to marital fallout. The ultimate irony: the king who defied God for an heir got 3 children, but no lasting male line. His great matter, proving that passion and power mix like oil and fire, scorching all in their path, and shocking the world by showing royalties, human frailties, lust, fear, cruelty that could topple empires as surely as armies. Henry's scandals endure because they humanized the divine right of kings, transforming a monarch from godlike figure to flawed man enslaved by desire. His quest, reshaping faith, finance, and frontiers in ways that still define Britain, from the Anglican Church's global reach to the economic model of seizing assets for state gain. Inspiring countless dramas like Wolf Hall or The Tudors that remind us scandals aren't relics, they're the raw stuff of history, where one-bedroom's turmoil can echo through centuries, proving even crowns bend to the heart's chaotic beat. As the Roman Empire staggered toward its inevitable collapse, its once mighty structures crumbling under the weight of barbarian invasions, crippling inflation, and relentless internal strife that saw emperors rise and fall like leaves in a storm. Prostitution remained one of the few constants in the chaos, a resilient industry that continued to generate much-needed revenue for a treasury drained by endless wars and public spectacles, even as moralists and emerging Christian leaders pointed to it as the very symbol of Rome's moral rot and the cause of its downfall. This wasn't mere survival for the sex trade. It was evolution, adapting to the empire's twilight by becoming both a fiscal lifeline and a convenient scapegoat, with its economic contributions etched indelibly into the physical remnants of Rome's glory. The towering arches of the Colosseum, where crowds once roared for blood, the intricate aqueducts that quenched the thirst of 1,000,000 souls packed into the eternal city, and the vast network of roads that carried legions to distant frontiers and merchants to profitable horizons, all partially funded by the vectigal ex captris, that infamous tax on every intimate encounter, and the unceasing operations of lupinaria that stayed open through sieges and sackings, their dim lamps flickering as symbols of an economy that refused to die quietly. But as Rome fractured into East and West, with the western half succumbing in for 76 AD, while the Byzantine East lingered on, prostitution's role shifted dramatically from a pragmatic economic pillar under pagan emperors to a vilified emblem of sin under Christian rule, its taxes abolished and its practitioners driven underground. Yet its legacy endures not just in the stones of ancient monuments, but in the broader historical narrative, revealing the hypocrisies of power and influencing modern debates on regulated vice economies that grapple with the same tensions between morality, exploitation, and profit that defined Rome's approach. Let's trace this transformation, examining how the industry navigated the empire's final centuries, how its revenues built the icons we still visit today, how it faced increasing scapegoating from religious reformers, and why its story offers poignant lessons for contemporary societies, all woven with the ironic thread that Rome's grandeur was often sustained by the very vices its leaders publicly condemned in the empire's earlier, more stable phases under rulers like Augustus, who regulated prostitution to channel it into taxable channels while promoting family values through laws like the Lex Julia, or Trajan, whose conquests flooded slave markets with fresh stock for brothels. The sex trade was seamlessly integrated into the economic fabric, its networks of trade in perfumes, wigs, and human bodies supporting a vast web of commerce that spanned the Mediterranean and beyond. But by the 3rd century AD, during the so-called crisis of the 3rd century, a period of near-constant upheaval with over 20 emperors in 50 years, rampant hyperinflation that saw the denarius lose almost all its silver content, and invasions by Goths, Persians, and others that strained military budgets to breaking point, the industry's reliability turned it into a critical asset, as traditional revenue streams like agricultural taxes dried up due to abandoned farms and disrupted trade routes plagued by pirates and bandits, leaving urban centers like Rome swollen with refugees and unemployed masses who turned to vice for distraction or survival. Demand for prostitution didn't wane. If anything, it intensified. Soldiers on furlough from endless frontier wars sought solace in taverns and bathhouses where encounters were commonplace. Displaced citizens escaped the grim reality of bread shortages and plague through fleeting pleasures, and even elites facing their own financial squeezes from debased currency frequented high-end meretrices for a semblance of normalcy amid the turmoil. The vectigal ex captris, instituted by Caligula and refined over centuries, became a fiscal anchor in this storm. With emperors like Aurelian R. 272–275 AD, who briefly restored order through brutal efficiency, likely raising rates or enforcing collection more stringently to fund his monetary reforms that introduced the Aurelian coin in an attempt to halt inflation. And in Rome alone, with conservative estimates of 10,000 to 20,000 active prostitutes, each contributing through pact or daily taxes. The haul could reach 10,000 to 50,000 denarii per day, enough to cover a legion's payroll for weeks, or repair vital infrastructure like the Aurelian walls, built hastily to defend against barbarian threats. Empire-wide, from bustling ports like Ostia, where sailors fresh from perilous voyages demanded exotic companions imported via the same ships that carried grain and silk, to frontier camps along the Danube, where camp followers serviced troops and kept morale from collapsing. Brothels acted as local economic stabilizers, employing ancillary workers such as cleaners, cooks, guards, and perfume vendors, who in turn supported families and paid their own taxes, creating a multiplier effect that helped sustain communities even as the broader economy contracted. And this adaptability ensured that prostitution outlasted many other sectors, providing a buffer against the volatility that saw Rome's GDP plummet by perhaps 50% from its second-century peak. According to modern economic historians who analyze pottery, shards, and tax records to reconstruct the era's fiscal woes, the physical legacy of this industry is perhaps its most tangible and ironic imprint, embedded in the very monuments that define Rome's enduring image and draw millions of tourists annually, generating billions in modern revenue for Italy's economy, while silently testifying to the hidden recontributions of ancient sex workers whose labors were taxed to build them. Take the Colosseum, that iconic amphitheater inaugurated under Titus in 80 AD, but conceived and funded by his father Vespasian after the civil wars of 69 AD, where vice revenues, including those from prostitution, helped cover the colossal costs of its construction, estimated at millions of sesterces, with scholars arguing that the vectigal ex captoris provided a steady stream amid the treasury's post-Nero depletion, and later repairs under emperors like Domitian or Severus were similarly supported, creating a structure that hosted gladiatorial games and public executions, spectacles designed to distract the masses from economic hardships, much like the brothels themselves did on a smaller scale. Similarly, the grand baths of Caracalla, completed in 216 AD and capable of accommodating 1,600 bathers at once, where prostitution often flourished in the steam-filled fringes despite official bans, owed their maintenance and expansions to these polluted funds. As Severus Alexander's policy segregated prostitution taxes for public infrastructure to avoid moral contamination of the general areum, ensuring that the baths' symbols of Roman hygiene and leisure were ironically sustained by an industry notorious for its association with disease and debauchery. Aqueducts like the Aqua Traiana, built under Trajan in 109 AD to supply water to Trastevere and beyond, required constant upkeep against leaks and sabotage, costs partially met by vice levies that flowed as reliably as the water itself, a poignant twist given that many prostitutes in cramped celle lacked access to clean water and relied on communal fountains or bathhouse rinses for hygiene. Even the extensive road network, such as the Via Appia, which facilitated trade, military movements, and the very slave caravans that supplied brothels with fresh captives, benefited from these revenues for repairs, underscoring how prostitution's economic role intertwined with the empire's logistical backbone, enabling the movement of goods and people that kept commerce alive even as frontiers contracted. These monuments weren't abstract achievements, they were tools of control, providing bread and circuses to pacify the populace. And the sex trade's contributions ensured their longevity, a legacy that modern visitors unwittingly honor when snapping photos at sites partly built on the denarii earned in shadowed encounters. As the empire's decline accelerated into the 4th and 5th centuries, prostitution's societal role pivoted sharply, evolving from a tolerated economic necessity under pagan rulers to a reviled emblem of moral corruption under the ascendant Christian regime that sought to purge Rome of its heathen vices. Emperors like Constantine, who converted in 312 AD and shifted the capital to Constantinople, began reframing the narrative, with Christianity's emphasis on chastity and sin casting prostitution as a pagan holdover that symbolized the old order's decadence. And while Constantine didn't abolish the trade, outright practicality demanded revenue. His Edict of Milan in 313 AD promoted religious tolerance that indirectly empowered Christian critics to attack vice more openly. By the time of Theodosius I r. 379 to 395 AD, the empire was officially Christian, and in 392 AD he outlawed pagan practices, including the vectigal ex capturis, deeming it tainted money unfit for a holy state, redirecting any remaining funds to church coffers or charitable works, a move that appealed to moral reformers like Ambrose of Milan, who thundered against brothels as dens of Satan. This scapegoating served a purpose. By blaming prostitution for Rome's woes-urbane decay, military defeats, plagues leaders deflected from deeper failures like administrative bloat, overtaxation, and barbarian incursions that sacked Rome in 410 AD under Alaric, allowing emperors to rally support around Christian virtue while ignoring how the trade had long stabilized society by providing outlets for tensions that might otherwise explode into revolt. Yet, the industry didn't vanish. It adapted underground, with brothels operating covertly in taverns or private homes, untaxed and unregulated, which ironically worsened exploitation as workers lost even the minimal protections of registration. And in the Byzantine East, where the empire endured until 1453, prostitution persisted under stricter oversight, with Empress Theodora, former prostitute who rose to power alongside Justinian, pushing laws in the 530s AD to protect women from pimps and forced labor, though enforcement was inconsistent amid ongoing wars with Persians and Arabs. Augustine of Hippo, in his City of God for 26 AD, captured the ambivalence: remove prostitutes from human affairs, and you will unsettle everything because of lusts, acknowledging its social utility while urging reform, a pragmatic view that echoed Rome's earlier tolerance, but now framed in Christian terms of sin and redemption. The human dimension of this legacy is perhaps the most haunting, as the vast majority of prostitutes enslaved women from conquered lands, freeborn outcasts driven by poverty, or opportunistic freelancers, scant traces in the historical record. Their lives reduced to fleeting graffiti in Pompeii's Lupana, like "Here I fucked many girls," or desperate curses against rivals, offering glimpses of resilience amid suffering, with rare stories of ascent like Theodora, who parlayed her brothel past into imperial influence and legal reforms, standing as exceptions that highlight the rule of exploitation under infamia's shadow. For most, the trade meant grueling days in dim Soleil, health ravaged by disease and abuse, earnings siphoned by pimps and taxes, and no path to respectability. Their contributions to Rome's economy's stabilizing inflation through steady revenue, supporting trade in luxuries like perfumes and wigs, and even funding the very temples where they might pray for escaparist by history's bias toward the elite. This erasure underscores the irony. Rome's moralists, from Cicero to Christian fathers, decried the trade while benefiting from its fruits, with senators owning brothels discreetly and emperors, like Caligula, taxing it for personal extravagance, revealing a society that preached stoic virtue but thrived on human frailty. Modern parallels abound. Regulated sex work in places like the Netherlands or Nevada mirrors Rome's taxed model, grappling with stigma versus safety, while debates on decriminalization echo Augustine's reluctant tolerance and the economic Engelweiss. Industries generating billions in taxes today reflects how societies still profit from what they publicly shun, prompting questions about exploitation, consent, and the true cost of necessary evils. In wrapping this legacy, it's clear that prostitution didn't cause Rome's fall over exploitation, corruption, and external pressures did that, but it echoed through the decline, sustaining the empire longer than it might have otherwise, while exposing its hypocrisies in stark relief. With the monuments standing today as silent witnesses to the untold stories of those who paid the price in flesh and freedom. As historians reflect, the empire's wealth was forged in the fires of marginalized labor, a foundation as enduring as its ruins. A reminder that history's grand narratives often overlook the intimate transactions that built them. And in pondering Rome's sex trade, we confront our own era's tensions between morality and money, virtue and vice, ensuring that the lessons of the Lupernaria continue to resonate, not as ancient curiosities, but as mirrors to the human condition. Step back to the opulent halls of Versailles in the waning days of the 18th century, where the air shimmered with the scent of rosewater and conspiracy, and the French monarchy teetered on the brink of oblivion under the weight of its own extravagance. With King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette presiding over a court that epitomized accentless masquerades, towering hairstyles, and gardens manicured to perfection, while outside the palace gates, peasants scraped by on moldy bread, amid crop failures and skyrocketing taxes that funded wars and whims alike. This royal marriage wasn't merely a union of two awkward teenagers thrust into power. It was a ticking bomb of scandal that detonated the French Revolution, blending bedroom failures like Louis's notorious impotence with Marie's rumored affairs and symbols of detachment, such as the fabricated "let them eat cake" quote, which ignited bread riots, toppled the Bastille, and unleashed a torrent of guillotines that claimed thousands, including the royals themselves, reshaping Europe from monarchy to republic and paving the way for Napoleon's ascent, all wrapped in ironic layers. Where a queen vilified for orgies suffered from her husband's inability to perform, their private dysfunction mirroring France's public economic and social collapse that saw debt balloon to unsustainable heights and the masses rise in fury. The alliance began as a calculated diplomatic maneuver in 1770, when the 14-year-old Maria Antonia Josepha Johanna, daughter of Austrian Empress Maria Theresa, was dispatched from Vienna to marry the 15-year-old Louis, Dauphin of France, in a bid to heal the scars of the 7 Years' War that had pitted Habsburg Austria against Bourbon France, leaving both powers weakened and eager for reconciliation through matrimonial ties that promised mutual support against common enemies like Prussia and Britain. Renamed Marie Antoinette to sound more French, she arrived amid pomp-elaborate processions, fireworks displays, and a trousseau valued at hundreds of thousands of livres. But the wedding night foreshadowed disaster. The traditional bedding ceremony, where courtiers observed the consummation to ensure legitimacy, revealed a fumbling failure, with Louis's condition of phimosis, a tight foreskin causing pain during intercourse, compounded by his innate shyness, obesity from overindulgence in hunting and sweets, and perhaps psychological blocks from a domineering grandfather, leading to 7 agonizing years without consummation, a fact that leaked through court gossip and became fodder for satirical pamphlets across Europe. Marie, vibrant and homesick, confided in letters to her mother about Louis's incompleteness, lamenting the frustration that turned their opulent bedchamber into a symbol of royal inadequacy, while Versailles buzzed with mockery of the impotent king whose virility mirrored the monarchy's flaccid response to France's mounting crises. Debts from American Revolution aid reaching 1 billion livres by 1789, equivalent to half the annual budget, and bread prices doubling due to poor harvests. In 1788, that left Parisians rioting for sustenance. Finally, in 1777, after Marie's brother Joseph II visited and delivered blunt advice, including recommending surgery, which Louis underwent discreetly, they achieved consummation, producing 4 children: Marie Thérèse in 1778, Louis Joseph Dauphin in 1781, Louis Charles in 1785, and Sophie in 1786. Though the boy's fragility and Sophie's early death underscored the dynasty's precarious health, but the prolonged childlessness had already branded Marie as barren or worse, fueling accusations that she sought pleasure elsewhere to compensate for her husband's shortcomings. Those affair rumors snowballed into scandals that eroded the monarchy's legitimacy, with Marie's closest alleged paramour being the handsome Swedish diplomat Count Axel von Fersen, whom she met at a masked ball in 1774, and whose correspondence hints at a deep, possibly physical. Von Fersen's journals note clandestine visits to Versailles, and he later orchestrated a failed escape attempt for the family during the Revolution, risking execution for love. Libelous pamphlets, printed by underground presses and distributed in thousands, depicted Marie as the Austrian bitch, accusing her of lesbian trysts with favorites like the Duchesse de Polignac or Princess de Lamballe, orgies with courtiers and guards, and even incestuous relations with her brother-in-law, the Comte d'Artois, portraying her as a voracious seductress, draining the nation's coffers for diamonds and dresses, while the Third Estate groaned under taxes like the Gabel salt tax and tail land tax that funded her petty Trianon retreat, a faux rustic village where she played shepherdess amid real poverty. The 1785 affair of the diamond necklace amplified her villainy. Cardinal de Rohan, duped by con artist Jean Delamotte, into buying a 2,000-carat necklace worth 1.6 million livres, thinking it for Marie, was exposed in a scheme Marie knew nothing about. But trials and acquittals didn't matter. The public saw it as proof of her greed, with satirical prints showing her bedecked in jewels while beggars starved, exacerbating resentment as France's debt hit 4 billion livres by 1788, half from American war loans, and bread shortages sparked the Women's March on Versailles in October 1789, where market women demanded affordable food and dragged the royals back to Paris as virtual prisoners. The let them eat cake, mythactually a recycled anecdote from Rousseau, predating Mara, crystallized her image as out of touch, though she never said it. Instead, her real extravagance, like spending 258,000 livres on clothes in 1785, symbolized the regime's disconnect amid Enlightenment ideas from Voltaire and Rousseau that questioned divine right and fueled calls for equality. The revolution's flames, kindled by these scandals, consumed the couple. The 1789 Estates General morphed into the National Assembly demanding reforms. The Bastille fell on July 14th amid bread riots amplified by royal indifference, and the royals' failed flight to Varennes in 1791 exposed them as traitors colluding with Austria, leading to their imprisonment in the Temple and the monarchy's abolition in 1792. Louis's trial for treason ended with his guillotining in January 1793, his final plea for peace drowned by revolutionary drums, while Marie, stripped of children, her son Louis Charles, abused and dying in prison, faced her own in October, accused of everything from incest with her son, a coerced confession from the boy, to plotting with Farazan. Her dignified defense ignored as she met the blade at 37. Her last sight, the jeering mob. Irony pervades. A marriage marred by impotence ended heirless in power, their scandals accelerating a revolution that guillotined 17,000, birthed the Reign of Terror, and collapsed the economy with hyperinflation from assignats paper money backed by church lands. Yet it also sowed seeds of liberty, equality, fraternity that inspired global change, with Napoleon's rise from the rubble turning France into an empire anew. Rising from the revolution's guillotine-stained streets like a phoenix in epaulets, Napoleon Bonaparte transformed France from chaotic republic to continental juggernaut. But his marriage to Josephine de Beauharnais was a whirlwind of adoration, adultery, and ambition that paralleled his military meteors, beginning as a fervent romance amid terror's aftermath, fracturing under mutual betrayals that mirrored his battlefield triumphs and defeats, and culminating in a divorce driven by dynastic desperation that not only broke hearts but ignited wars, reshaping Europe's borders. With economic surges from conquest plunder giving way to ruinous campaigns and his ultimate exile, all underscored by ironic fates, where the emperor who conquered nations couldn't secure an heir from the woman he loved. His incomparable Josephine, becoming both muse and millstone in a saga that blended personal passion with imperial power plays. Josephine, born Marie Joseph Rose Tascher de la Pagerie in 1763 on a Martinique sugar plantation, was a Creole widow of noble stock when she encountered the 26-year-old artillery officer Napoleon in 1795 Paris. Her first husband, Alexandre de Beauharnais, guillotined in 1794, leaving her imprisoned during the Terror before release and reinvention. In salons where scandal was survival's currency, her allure elegant, sophisticated, with a sultry charm captivating the socially awkward. Corsican, whose rapid rise from Toulon siege hero to Italian campaign commander made him a star. Their courtship blazed. Napoleon's letters gushed obsession. I wake, filled with you. Your portrait speaks to me, while Josephine, initially lukewarm, calling him that little general, saw potential in his ambition, marrying in March 1796, days before his departure for Italy, where victories at Lodi and Arcole flooded France with Lutgold. Art like the Louvre's Venus de Millebu's, then the economy ravaged by revolution, with Napoleon's conquests injecting millions in tribute, that funded directory reforms and set his star ascending. Scandal erupted early during Napoleon's 1798 Egyptian campaign aimed at cutting British India roots, yielding Rosetta Stone but military quagmire. Letters revealed Josephine's affair with dashing Lieutenant Hippolyte Charles, enraging Napoleon, who retaliated with mistresses like Pauline Fors, nearly divorcing upon return, but reconciling in a tearful 1799 scene, her charm prevailing as he seized power in the Brumaire coup, becoming first consul and paving his emperorship. Betrayals defined their bond. Josephine's indiscretions stemmed from loneliness and his absences, while Napoleon, ever the conqueror, fathered illegitimate children with lovers like actress Mademoiselle George or Polish Countess Marie Weluska, whose son Alexander in 1810 proved his fertility amid their childlessness, a cruel twist, as Josephine's prior offspring suggested the issue lay with him, or incompatibility, fueling family pressure from siblings like Caroline to divorce for an heir. Their peak came in 1804's coronation at Notre Dame, Napoleon crowning himself, then Josephine, in a ceremony blending republican simplicity with imperial pomp, her influence softening his autocracy through salons that networked allies. But by 1807, with nephew Napoleon Charles's death removing a potential successor, divorce loomed, Napoleon's letters turning cold, the veil is torn, as he eyed princesses for legitimacy. The 1809 announcement at Tuileries was theatrical, a formal dinner where Napoleon declared separation for France's good. Josephine fainting, perhaps staged, the annulment on mutual consent grounds, granting her empress title, 2 million francs yearly, and Malmaison, her tearful farewell, was his happiest moments, masking heartbreak as he wed Marie Louise of Austria in 1810 for Habsburg ties, birthing Napoleon II but alienating allies like Russia, whose Tsar Alexander felt snubbed, sparking the catastrophic 1812 invasion. The divorces, ripples, redrew maps. The Austrian match aimed to secure peace but provoked coalitions, with Russia's winter swallowing 600,000 troops. Only 40,000 returned. Economic strain from continental system blockades crippling French industry textiles collapsed. Unemployment soared in plunder from earlier wars. Italy yielded 45 million francs in 1796, giving way to deficits as campaigns cost 700 million francs yearly by 1813. Irony peaks in Napoleon's fall. Exiled to Elba in 1814 after Leipzig's defeat, his 100 Days' return in 1815 rallied France, but ended at Waterloo. Final banishment to St. Helena where he died in 1821, murmuring Josephine as last words in myth, while she perished in 1814. At Malmaison from pneumonia, her legacy romanticized as the love that humanized the tyrant. Their scandals a tapestry of ambition, where divorce for dynasty led to downfall, economic booms from victories crashing into ruin, and a man's heart proving mightier than his armies. Transport yourself to the tense, fog-bound Britain of the 1930s, where the sun was setting on the empire that once ruled a quarter of the world. Economic scars from the Great Depression still festered, with unemployment hovering at 15 to 20% in industrial heartlands like Wales and the North, and the shadow of fascism loomed from Berlin and Rome, threatening a second global war just 2 decades after the first's carnage. Into this precarious moment stepped Edward VIII, the charismatic, modern-minded king whose 326-day reign in 1936 detonated not with bombs or battles, but with a love affair that defied every convention of crown and country. His unyielding pursuit of Wallis Simpson, a twice-divorced American with a razor-sharp wit, impeccable style, and troubling whispers of Nazi sympathies, culminating in his abdication of voluntary surrender of the throne that sent shockwaves through the Commonwealth, rattled financial markets, and left the monarchy teetering on the brink just as Hitler marched toward aggression. This wasn't a discreet royal indiscretion like those of his grandfather, Edward VII's Playboy days. It was a full-blown constitutional crisis. With Edward's radio broadcast on December 11, 1936, I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do without the help and support of the woman I love, becoming an instant legend. A romantic gesture that humanized the throne but exposed its vulnerabilities, costing the economy in lost confidence and tourism, while ironically paving the way for his brother George VI's steadying hand during World War II, all threaded with poignant ironies like a king who toured depression-hit slums, preaching empathy, yet prioritized his heart over his subjects' stability. Edward, born David in 1894 to the stern George V and Queen Mary, grew up as the heir apparent in a rigid Victorian mold. He chafed against his youth marked by WWI service, though kept from front lines for safety, and a post-war role as empire's ambassador, touring India, Australia, and Africa to boost morale and trade, where his easy charm and concern for the poor visiting Welsh miners in 1936 and declaring something must be done earned him popularity but irked traditionalists who saw him as too progressive, perhaps even socialist-leaning. His private life, however, was a whirlwind of scandal from the start. Affairs with married women like Frida Dudley Ward, 1918 to 1934, and Lady Thelma Furness, whose 1934 introduction of Wallis at a house party ignited the flame that would consume his crown. Wallis, born Bessie Wallis Warfield in 1896 to a modest Baltimore family, was no wide-eyed debutante, divorced abusive naval pilot. Earl Winfield Spencer in 1927, after a tumultuous marriage marked by his alcoholism and her alleged Shanghai adventures, rumors of learning exotic sexual techniques in brothels, likely exaggerated by enemies, then married British shipping executive Ernest Simpson in 1928, settling in London, where her American flair and social climbing captivated high society. By 1934, with Ernest's business ties facilitating access, Wallis became Edward's mistress, their bond deepening amid golf outings, yacht cruises, and lavish gift-jewels from Cartier worth £110,000, millions today, including a platinum bracelet, engraved "Hold Tight," all while Ernest discreetly stepped aside, perhaps for financial perks or pressure. The affair scandal lay in its defiance. Wallis was not only divorced twice, but American common-born, and entangled in whispers of espionage. FBI files later revealed affairs with Italian Ambassador Dino Grandi, and more damningly, Nazi Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop, with allegations of 17 bouquets symbolizing encounters. Fueling post-war claims, she passed secrets during Edward's 1937 Germany visit, where he praised Hitler. As Prince of Wales, Edward's flings were tolerated. But kingship, after George V's January 1936 death, changed everything. The Church of England, head of which the king was supreme governor, forbade remarriage to divorcees with living ex-spouses. Wallises were both alive, and Dominion governments like Canada's and Australia's balked at a morganatic marriage. Wallis as consort, not queen. Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin, navigating a cabinet split and public unrest amid 2 million unemployed, confronted Edward in October 1936 as Wallis's divorce from Ernest finalized, warning abdication or renunciation with the British presunder. A gentleman's agreement silent until December, when foreign leaks forced headlines like King's marriage crisis. The economic stakes were high. Stocks dipped 2% on uncertainty. Tourism to royal sites like Windsor faltered amid boycott calls. And the empire's unity wobbled as South Africa and Ireland hinted at republicanism if the marriage proceeded. Edward's December 11th thrust unprepared Bertie George VI into kingship, his stammer and anxiety immortalized in the king's speech, contrasting Edward's poise, but George's quiet resolve, and Queen Elizabeth's, the Queen Mother's, steel-guided Britain through World War II, with Edward exiled as Duke of Windsor, marrying Wallis in June 1937 at a French chateau. No royals attended, only 16 guests, their life. A nomadic glamour of parties in France and the Bahamas, where he governed 1940 to 1945, dogged by pro-Nazi accusations. The irony stings. Edward, who abdicated for love, lived regretfully. What a waste. He lamented while his selfish choice spared Britain a potentially sympathetic king during Hitler's rise. As declassified files show his 1940 overtures to Nazis for restoration post-conquest. Economically, the abdication's short-term hit £25,000 civil list adjustment. Lost prestige affecting sterling faded, but it modernized the monarchy, paving for Elizabeth II's longevity. Edward died in 1972, Wallis in 1986, their love enduring, but at empire's cost, a scandal that proved romance could unseat kings as surely as revolutions. Fast forward to the glossy, tabloid-fueled 1980s Britain, where Margaret Thatcher's free market reforms clashed with minor strikes. IRA bombs terrorized streets, and the royal family offered a beacon of continuity through the fairy tale wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer, a spectacle watched by 750 million globally that promised renewal but devolved into a public unraveling of affairs, leaked tapes, and acrimonious divorce. Shocking the world, by exposing the Windsor's dysfunction, costing fortunes in settlements and security, denting the economy through tourism slumps and shaken investor confidence, and forcing reforms that dragged the monarchy into the 20th century while nearly toppling it amid Republican calls. Diana, born in 1961 to aristocratic parents, her father, Earl Spencer, was a 20-year-old kindergarten aide when she wed the 32-year-old heir in July 1981 at St. Paul's Cathedral. Her 25-foot train and innocent charm captivating a nation weary from recession, but behind the veil lurked mismatch. Charles, bound by duty and emotionally reserved, had long loved Camilla Parker Bowles, née Shand, married to Andrew since 1973, resuming their affair by 1986, while Diana, thrust into the firm's rigid world, battled bulimia, postpartum depression, and isolation that drove her to self-harm, as revealed in Andrew Morton's 1992 biography. Diana, her true story, based on her secret tapes. The scandals built slowly, then erupted. Sons William 1982 and Harry 1984 provided heirs, bolstering the image of domestic bliss, but cracks appeared. Diana's affairs, starting with bodyguard Barry Manicky, who died suspiciously in 1987, then riding instructor James Hewitt, 1986 to 1991, fueling Harry's paternity rumors despite denials, car salesman James Gilby, and others like Oliver Hoare, while Charles's bond with Camilla deepened. Their 1989 phone call, leaked in 1993's Camilla tape, where he infamously wished to be her tampon, horrifying the public and press. Diana's 1992 Squidgygate leak-intimate calls with Gilby calling her Squidgy preceded Morton's book, which detailed her suicide attempts and the marriage's crowded nature, selling millions and shifting sympathy to her as the people's princess. The 1992 separation, announced by PM John Major amid Windsor's on-news horribilities, including Andrew's split from Fergie and Anne's divorce, cost the royals dearly. Public funding scrutiny led to the Queen paying taxes from 1993, and tourism. Two palaces dipped 10 to 15% as polls showed 47% favoring abdication for Charles. The 1996 divorce, finalized after Diana's bombshell 1995 Panorama interview. 23 million viewers admitting adultery and questioning Charles's kingship. There were 3 of us in this marriage, granted her £17 million lump sum, £400,000 annually, but stripped HRH title, with ongoing costs for security, £3 million yearly, straining the £60 million civil list. Diana's death in 1997, Paris crash, fleeing paparazzi. Unleashed grief, 2.5 billion watched funeral, and anger at the royals' initial aloofness, with "Where is our Queen?" headlines, forcing Elizabeth's broadcast, boosting her but denting the economy. Short-term, through mourning-related closures, though long-term Diana effect surged tourism, £500 million yearly from memorials. Charles rehabilitated slowly, marrying Camilla in 2005 amid controversy, civil ceremony, Queen's absence from vows, their scandals forcing monarchy reforms like streamlined finances and media engagement, paving for William's modern approach. Irony abounds. The fairy tale that fractured the firm humanized it. Diana's legacy in charity, landmines ban, AIDS stigma outshining Charles's until his 2023 coronation. proving scandals don't destroy dynasties, they evolve them. These royal marriage scandals, from Henry's church-shattering heir hunt and Catherine the Great's power-betting lovers to Marie Antoinette's revolutionary affairs, Napoleon's map-redrawing divorce, Edward's love-fueled abdication, and Charles' Diana's tabloid-torn fairy tale transcended personal drama to become catalysts that upended economies through war costs and settlements, while sparking unexpected booms in plunder or tourism, drove profound reforms from religious schisms and republican births to modern transparency and tax obligations, and stripped away the mystique of monarchy, revealing rulers as fallible humans entangled in love, lust, and legacy that could ignite revolutions or abdications with a single indiscretion. In their collective wake, thrones toppled, borders shifted, and societies evolved, with ironic threads like impotent kings demanding virility or romantic sacrifices aiding tyrants, rises weaving through history, inspiring everything from Enlightenment ideals to today's celebrity culture, where private lives fuel public discourse. Ultimately, these tales remind us that behind the crowns and coronations lie hearts as vulnerable as any. But when royalties break, the fragments don't merely scar, they reshape civilizations, proving scandal's power as history's wild card, a force that humanizes the mighty while challenging us to balance passion with duty in our own lives.